seizure, or is this like a loss of consciousness, or would that qualify as a seizure, or could it qualify, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And, one of the ways of thinking about it is, it definitely could be. It depends on the diagnosis that they get done, how detailed those descriptions are. Certainly the way that people describe things, or they talk about the aftermath and looking at somebody, that certainly sounds like a seizure in a lot of cases. But you have to think that it's one of these things that can't always be caught. And a lot of medicine, whether we like it or not, or whether insurance adjusters, defense attorneys, plaintiffs' attorneys, a lot of it's kind of guesswork. Doctors can't know everything. We give them this power to know kind of everything. We put everything in their hands, but man, sometimes they just don't have the information to know it. It certainly seems like, and you talk about concussion and an altered state of consciousness.
Yeah.
If you have that altered state of consciousness and there's other kind of convulsive movements going along with it that somebody observed, I think you definitely could have a diagnosis of a seizure.
Well, because I know it's not uncommon for children, for instance, to fall and hit their head and have a seizure right then. So I don't know what would be different about a car accident having that seizure as well.
Right.
And I know it's every parent, gets scared to death if their kid hits their head and has a seizure. But that doesn't, it's there. It would seem like if you're a car wreck, you hit your head, you're totally unresponsive, but your eyes are open, and that sounds like a seizure to me.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where those eyewitness accounts matter so much, right? To corroborate what happens in the hospital, or even to tell the doctor, right? You need to be paying attention to this, because if the doctor doesn't know, the EMT doesn't write it down, or the eyewitnesses don't write it down, and now you're talking, the doctor wouldn't even know to investigate that, would he?
Right, and you got to wonder just how much it's being correctly diagnosed, because you think oftentimes the picture that you hear about somebody at the scene of an accident is, I showed up, my husband, he was just sitting there on the curb, staring off into nowhere and just rocking back and forth. It's like, to me, that sounds, according to this definition, like that could be some seizure activity, but is that something that's going to be diagnosed? Is there more that we're going to learn? It certainly seems like, like the brain, we're always learning something, and maybe there will be more ways to find that out.
It seems like for our listeners that definitely, if you were to have a spouse or family member who was acting that way at the scene, to be particularly paying attention for a second seizure, right? Or to something else that looks similar to that, so you can tell the doctor. Because, two is definitely seizures, I would say, right?
Yeah, and well, at least when you go to the doctor, talk to the doctor about what you saw the person doing at the scene. It's not just an opportunity for them to talk, because they might not remember. They might have been in an altered state of consciousness. It's your job to advocate for your loved one and tell them what you saw when you got there, because that could give the doctor the information they need to say, well, that's concerning. Let me do an EEG and figure out if there's any kind of abnormal electrical activity.
And when we talked before, you said I think the percentage of people who have an EEG that's normal, even who have epilepsy, you said was 10%, which sounds like a super small percentage, but that's 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
So if I line up 10 people with epilepsy, one of those people has a perfectly clean EEG all the time.
Yeah.
And out of 100, that would be 10 people. So it's a significant percentage. So the EEG is it's there, but it's not it's not persuasive to me. 10 out of 100, there's a lot of, these all 10 people, they came up clean, right?
It's not a great tool. It's more of the eyewitness accounts that are really gonna, help the doctor. And
the bad
you can't
part,
measure that. It's what somebody saw.
And the bad part is I can't be an eyewitness for myself, right?
Right. Yeah.
I've got other people who have to help me.
Right.
Because I might not even know it, right? Would I always know that I had that seizure, or?
I don't think you'd know at all. I think you're not there, and we talk with clients all the time. Well, I blacked out. I don't know what happened, and then all of a sudden I was outside my car. So what other people saw that our client doing in that situation is crucial, because they're not going to remember it. It's a lot of times there's just that kind of localized amnesia to that event, and there's just no memory of it.
So what we would tell everybody is, if your loved one is this way, pay close attention for the next bit. Because another seizure could be coming, or another one that we can diagnose as a seizure can come, versus this one where they're like, well, you had a loss of consciousness or something. We can diagnose that as a seizure, and then they can start looking for damage, right?
Right. When we talk about those different categories, of how post-traumatic seizures are classified, you've got immediate, you've got early, and you've got late, and those break down into different things that you can look for.
Let's talk about the categories of seizures and how these are diagnosed, or these are types based on the time, right, when the seizure occurs.
Right.
And I think the first category was like immediate, right? Boom.
Immediate. Occur at the time or within minutes to hours after the injury, with an incident rate of 1 to 4%. So
Okay.
only 1 to 4% are immediate seizures.
So 1 to 4% have an immediate seizure at the scene that's corroborated and diagnosed.
Right. Next category would be early seizure.
When do those start?
These occur within the first week after the injury, and that has an incident rate of 4 to 25%.
So significantly more. I mean, now obviously that's a big range, but that depends on which study you're following, right? And I mean, the cynical part of me would say is who's paying for that study?
Right.
I mean, because some people would certainly want to minimize the number of seizures they have, and others just tell the truth is what I would say.
Exactly. And there are risk factors that can kind of tell you whether you're going to be more susceptible to an early seizure. You know, some of those being, you know, development of early seizures occurs more likely when there's bleeding within the brain,
Okay.
or skull, when there's a loss of consciousness, or when it's a pediatric age group. You know, like we talked about before, children, they're at a greater risk for developing seizures than adults.
All right. So if I've got blood in the brain, definitely pay attention. Child, definitely pay attention. And what was the other one?
The other one is loss of consciousness.
All right. So if I got knocked unconscious, my family needs to be watching out for this.
Right.
And that's 4 to 25. So 25 is what, 1 out of every 4 people who.
Right.
All right. I mean, who suffers a brain injury at a scene, 1 out of 4. That's a lot.
Right.
What's the next category then?
And moving on to the late seizures,
Okay.
maybe even more surprisingly, these occur with an incidence rate of 9% to 42%.
Holy cow.
These occur after the first week of the injury, with approximately 90% of these seizures happening within the first month.
Okay, so you're definitely not out of the woods after the first week. As a matter of fact, it's worse.
Right. It seems like it's more likely going to happen in this period, and that's where you have the disruption in the normal brain activity, and it leads to a lot of effects that take time to play out. Something that's not appreciated a lot of times by, you know, adjusters, defense attorneys, just, you know, normal everyday people.
Right.
How would you know that?
So we've talked about that fact that
Right.
you have the injury, you go home, you sort of think, I don't want to say think you're okay, but you think you're on the road to recovery. And then this cascade effect, now it's like the virus is in you kind of deal, and now it gets worse, which is why that incidence rate goes up.
Right. Boom. Seizure. And, you know, I've had clients who say, yeah, you know, I had this weird incident. I was in the shower, or a client actually was talking about her daughter. Her daughter was in the shower about a month after the crash happened. Big rear end collision. Her daughter collapsed in the shower, had a seizure. Like, well, we don't know what's caused. Well, you know, let's get to the doctor and get them to find out. But it's probably related to the brain injury.
I was going to say,
she was diagnosed with.
According to the statistics you found in the medical peer-reviewed articles, because that's where these come from, is medical articles. I mean, there's at least a 45% chance it was a car accident.
Yeah, I mean, even get this. Most of these occur within the first year after the injury, but the risk, it can extend out over 10 years.
Holy cow.
10 years after a brain injury. And, you know, you've got different risk factors that associate with that for development. Those are some of what we've talked about. You've got, if there's intracranial bleeding at the time of head trauma, you know, 10 years down the road, you could be suffering from seizure. If you have a lower Glasgow coma score, if you're older than 65 years old, or if there's, you know, prior chronic alcoholism of some issues.
So there's a whole bunch of things. So I guess what I take from this is it's very difficult to know, and it can pop up, but you certainly shouldn't discount. If anything happens in that first year, you definitely need to tell your doctor and your lawyer.
Right. And, you know, finding out, you know, when you have that post-traumatic epilepsy or seizure, post-traumatic epilepsy, that's a condition of having recurrent unprovoked seizures after the initial one.
Right.
But the time period where you need to be keeping an eye on things is within that 2 years after your first seizures. Let's say you have one in that late period, you know, 2 months after the crash, the injury. Within 2 years after that first seizure, 86% of those individuals will have a second seizure.
Wow.
If you have one within 2 years, 86%. 50 to 67% of those who experience a seizure after TBI will have their second seizure within the first year following the post-traumatic seizure.
Okay, so 50 to 60% have a seizure within the first year after having one. But then the stats, if you extend it out a little bit further from the seizure to 2 years, it's like, did you say 80% if you've had one? What that says to me, quite honestly, is, hey, if you've had one seizure, you're probably having another one. And if you have two, that's epilepsy. And the issue with that is when we think about epilepsy, I know there are many that can impact lots of aspects of your life. It can impact your driver's license, impact to get a pilot's license, all these things that are no longer eligible for you. Because to be quite honest, the government is concerned you may have another seizure while driving on the road, right? Because it's not like you have a lot of warning. Some of these, there's no warning.
Yeah, affects a lot of things people like to do also. You think about all the activities that involve flashing lights, video games, television, movie theaters, amusement parks, all types of things that people like to do for leisure activity, that can trigger those epileptic episodes. And, this is another really interesting fact is when you look at, causes of epilepsy, traumatic brain injury is the leading cause of epilepsy in young adults.
Wow.
So you think about a young person, a young adult that and it's a leading cause of epilepsy for them.
So all those video game warnings, they're talking to these people right here, right? To our listeners and people who've had one as a result of car accident.
Yeah, and you think about if you have one associated with the accident, your second one could be triggered by playing a video game, and then you essentially have a diagnosis of post-traumatic epilepsy at that point.
Wow. So I sort of thought there were two different things, right? But no, that's not the case. I mean, the same warnings for everybody with epilepsy applies to our brain injured folks as well. And I think about moms and stuff. Every one of them who has a kid who's suffered a brain injury is going to then be concerned forever.
Right.
I mean, I know my kids, when they were teenagers, loved to play video games and Fortnite and all these things and the warnings, or you look at a movie and it pops up, or like I say, the roller coaster, all these things. As soon as you get that diagnosis, you're concerned about them, and mom's going to be worried, dad's going to be worried, kid, you're going to be worried.
Yeah, it's a game changer, a life changer. It's everything can change just like that.
So once they do all these diagnoses, how do they treat folks? How do they help them? How do they help them deal with all of this? Is there medication? Is there therapy? What do they do?
Yeah, the goal here with recurrent seizures is to prevent them from occurring. A seizure is harmful to a person's health because there's this tremendous metabolic stress that it places on the brain cells.
Merely the aspect of having the seizure, that alone causes damage and is hard on the body. I mean, obviously, but it's devastating the body, you said.
Right, it's just tremendous stress on these brain cells, and you think about what that does in terms of just exciting things and sending them to a new level in terms of their activity. This can endanger someone's life, like you talked about, if it happens in a precarious position, like if someone's on the road. We had a client, this happened to her while she was driving.
Wow.
Happened to her twice within a couple of weeks. It's unfortunately a case we couldn't take, but that was something that happened to a client. And or say you're working on a ladder as a construction worker,
right?
A seizure, it's over.
Or at home, just up on a ladder, right? I mean, as we said, a lot of times there's no notice. So
right, and if you talk about this happening within a month after an injury, you think everything's all right. You're working out on the ladder, cleaning up the gutters, and you have a seizure that's caused by your traumatic brain injury, and your life's over.
Or shower, bath. The goal is to prevent them.
Right.
How do they do that?
Essentially, what we have to do this right now is medication, but there's no medication available that prevents the development of post-traumatic epilepsy.
It's not like I can just take something prophylactically to prevent it from occurring.
Well, there's meds that can reduce the recurrence. These are called anti-epileptic drugs or anticonvulsants. These will suppress the epileptic discharges from the brain or limit the spread of those discharges through the brain. So when we talked about that localized focus spread into generalized, it can kind of, almost nip it in the bud. And that's what we have right now.
So you have sort of it hits one area, but it doesn't spread everywhere. It's like a cage confines it to one area.
Right, you gotta just, almost snuff it out is almost the way you want to think about it. Now, most people's, post-traumatic epilepsy can be controlled pretty effectively with these anticonvulsants, but there's a subset, the TBI cases, with up to 13% in one study that are difficult to control no matter which type of anti-epileptic drug that you have. Just really important in these situations, in any situation where you have a traumatic brain injury, to get connected with an experienced neurologist who cares about you and who's going to listen to you. And I think that really starts with getting a lawyer who's going to listen to you and advocate for you and try to get you the best treatment you can get in the world.
And you said the neurologist who will really listen and care and try to help you. I think that's a key part here. Sometimes we think just any doctor, but you want an actual doctor. I'd say the best of the best doctors, right? The ones who have real bedside manner, who want to listen to you and deal with this, which probably isn't just the nearest doctor to you.
Right, and especially think about a neurologist. 87% of the counties in the United States don't have a neurologist.
Right, we talked about that in a prior episode. Right. They're just not there. So you're gonna have to try, no matter what, you're probably gonna have to travel to a big city. Probably have to book a bunch of time. Probably gonna have to test 2 or 3 to find one that works with you. You know what I mean? That you like and you found genuinely cares to even begin this. But I think the fear is with the medicine, how do you know it's working?
You know it's working because you're having less of them. It's preventing their recurrence, so you can see that. And some of them are very effective. Again, that subset that it doesn't work for, you're obviously going to see, hey, it's just not going to work with these people. Good thing though, you say, hey, you're going to have to travel to see, neurologists in many instances. But one of the really good things that we've talked about before is there are doctors all over the country who are doing incredible things with telemedicine at this point in time. Because when you're dealing with somebody who's suffering neurological symptoms, it's not always necessary for you to be able to touch and feel them, despite what, the insurance industry wants to tell you is, oh, you got to see them in person. No, some of the most important things that can be done over video, because it's looking at how somebody presents himself physically.
Wow, and the eyewitness to everything else. All that can be done telemedicine. And
the world's changing, and that's making great healthcare accessible for everyone, and not just for people who live in a big city or who have millions of dollars to throw around to see whatever doctor.
And I think those are 2 of the key things that we can be most hopeful about. Telemedicine, you can get treatment, like you say. I can live in rural areas and get a great doctor because they're there. Not that there aren't only great doctors in the city, but there just aren't enough neurologists.
Right.
So I can see one wherever they are, right?
Right. See them in the comfort of your own home, in your own environment. Some people, when they go to the doctor's office, their blood pressure goes sky high. Right. I have great blood pressure. When I go to the doctor's office, my blood pressure looks like I'm, 65 years old and 600 pounds.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
So you don't have all those added stressors. The doctor can actually see you in your natural environment, how you really are.
Right.
Which I think is huge, especially for our brain injury clients, because they don't need added stress. I would imagine added stressors are more likely to cause a seizure than not having them.
You can see the environment that they live in, how their life is, what things are like around them. So,
it would give a whole picture a lot better, right? Because
a picture inside of a doctor's office, that has limited value sometimes, I think.
All right, Thomas, thanks for being on the show today. I think we've learned a lot between last episode and this episode, talking about seizures and epilepsy and treatments and all the hope out there for all of our listeners. If this topic is interesting to you, comment down below. Or if there's another topic you would like us to talk about in one of our next episodes, please let us know. We'd be glad to delve into that for our listeners. Hit like and subscribe to see future episodes. And remember, if you're in pain, call Shane, 980-999-9999. If you've got a question for our concussion brain injury group, just give us a call and we'll get one of our lawyers to answer it.
In pain, so I call Shane, 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.